The Trump administration is reportedly preparing to significantly cut funding tied to military operations involving Iran. This expected reduction in war-related spending marks a notable shift in how Washington plans to approach its posture toward Tehran in the months ahead. Good evening. I'm reporting tonight on a developing story out of Washington. The Trump administration is expected to slash its funding request for Iran-related military operations. According to reports, senior officials within the administration have begun laying the groundwork for a leaner budget when it comes to U.S. military engagement scenarios involving Iran. This comes at a time when diplomatic back channels between the United States and the Islamic Republic have quietly reopened, signaling what some analysts are calling a strategic pivot away from confrontation and toward negotiation. Details are still emerging tonight, but what we know so far paints a clear picture of shifting priorities inside the White House and the Pentagon. Officials say the funding cuts are part of a broader review of discretionary military spending across several theaters of operation. Iran, long considered one of the most costly and complex strategic concerns for U.S. defense planners, appears to be at the center of this budgetary reassessment. According to reports from inside the Beltway, the administration's revised request could represent a reduction of several billion dollars compared to what previous defense planning cycles had anticipated. That is not a small number. That is a figure that ripples through every layer of military readiness, from the positioning of naval assets in the Persian Gulf to the intelligence networks that monitor Iran's nuclear activities around the clock. Officials say the decision was not made lightly. Senior advisors at the National Security Council have been weighing the costs of sustained military preparedness against Iran for months. The question being asked in those closed-door meetings, according to sources familiar with the discussions, is whether the current level of spending is sustainable, necessary, and aligned with the administration's broader foreign policy vision. The answer, it appears, is leaning toward reduction. For the men and women in uniform who serve in the region, this news carries real weight. Thousands of U.S. service members are stationed across the Middle East, many of them in roles directly tied to monitoring and countering Iranian influence. Any reduction in funding inevitably touches their resources, their readiness, and in some cases, their mission scope. Military families across the country will be watching closely as these budget conversations move forward. Beyond the battlefield, there is the intelligence community to consider. A significant portion of Iran-related defense spending goes not to weapons or warships, but to the analysts, the satellites, the signals intelligence operations that give American commanders and policymakers the information they need to make decisions. Officials say any cuts to this funding stream would need to be carefully managed to avoid creating gaps in situational awareness at a critical time. America's allies in the region are also paying close attention tonight. Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates have all built parts of their own security frameworks around the assumption of strong American financial and military commitment to countering Iran. According to reports, diplomatic conversations are already underway to reassure regional partners that any spending reduction does not signal a withdrawal of American commitment. Officials say the message being delivered privately is that fewer dollars does not mean less resolve. And yet, skeptics remain. Members of Congress on both sides of the aisle have raised concerns about the timing of this expected funding slash. With Iran continuing to enrich uranium and with proxy forces backed by Tehran active across multiple countries, some lawmakers argue this is precisely the wrong moment to ease the financial pressure. According to reports, several senior members of the Senate Armed Services Committee have already requested briefings from Pentagon officials. Those briefings, we are told, are being scheduled. The human impact of this story extends beyond government buildings and military bases. American contractors, defense manufacturers, and technology firms that hold Iran-related defense contracts employ tens of thousands of workers across the country. From shipyards in Virginia to aerospace facilities in California and Texas, any substantial shift in Iran war funding requests creates a downstream economic effect that reaches into communities that may never have considered themselves connected to Middle East policy. Officials say the administration is aware of these economic dimensions and is factoring them into its final calculations. There is also the matter of deterrence. For decades, American military spending in relation to Iran has served not just as a capability, but as a signal. The message has been that the United States possesses the will and the means to respond to Iranian aggression. Critics of the expected funding cuts argue that reducing that financial commitment, even in a budget document, sends a message of its own, a message that adversaries in Tehran, Moscow, and Beijing will be watching for and potentially exploiting. Supporters of the cuts, however, offer a different perspective. They argue that bloated defense spending tied to Iran has for too long been driven by institutional inertia and worst-case scenario planning rather than realistic threat assessments. According to reports, some officials within the administration believe that a leaner, more targeted approach to Iran-related funding could actually improve effectiveness by forcing a sharper focus on the most critical priorities rather than spreading resources thin across every conceivable contingency. The diplomatic dimension of this story cannot be overstated. Details are still emerging, but according to reports, back-channel communications between American and Iranian officials have become more substantive in recent weeks. Some analysts believe the expected funding reduction is not simply a budget maneuver, but a deliberate signal to Tehran that Washington is open to a different kind of relationship, one built less on military threat and more on negotiated agreement. If that is the case, the dollars and cents of this story are secondary to the geopolitical message being sent. Still, officials caution that no final decisions have been made. The budget process inside the executive branch is long and layered. What begins as an expected request can change significantly before it reaches Capitol Hill. And once it does reach Congress, members of both chambers have historically been reluctant to reduce spending tied to what they describe as existential regional threats. The road from an expected slash to an actual slash is paved with hearings, amendments, and political negotiations that can take months to resolve. Tonight, the story is the signal. The fact that the Trump administration is even expected to reduce Iran war funding marks a meaningful departure from the trajectory of recent years. It tells us something about where this White House sees the Iran threat today compared to where previous administrations positioned it. Whether that reassessment proves to be wise, premature, or politically sustainable remains to be seen. For the American public, the takeaway is this: your government is reconsidering how much it is willing to spend preparing for a potential conflict with Iran. That conversation is happening right now in rooms that most Americans will never see, among officials who carry the weight of decisions that could affect millions of lives both here and abroad. Details are still emerging, and we will continue to follow this story as it develops. According to reports, the formal budget request is expected to be submitted in the coming weeks. When it is, the numbers will speak for themselves, and we will be here to walk you through every detail. This is a story that will have chapters we have not yet read. But tonight, the opening lines are clear. The Trump administration is expected to slash its Iran war funding requests. And in Washington, what a government chooses not to spend can be just as telling as what it chooses to spend. We will keep watching, we will keep reporting, and we will bring you the facts as they come. That is our broadcast for this evening. Stay with us for continued coverage as this story develops. Good night.